Site, all in favor? Carried. Okay, disclosure of pecuniary interest, if any? None noted. There's nothing in the introduction section, so we moved the department schedule. 5.1 general government.
Okay, so thank you. Just a couple of notes I wanted to outline for this evening, some of our goals. So again, we would like to finish this meeting at 9, if at all possible. If we're very close to that and it's only going to take a few minutes to finish up, then of course we're going to carry on. Tonight we're also trying to get through the remaining 8 of the 49 budgets that you have to deal with on a regular basis. So I'm going to start with, as the agenda outlines, doing general government, council, administration, planning, and zoning. Then we'll turn it over to David for fire, EST, and emergency planning. And then Connie's going to be joining us. She's at a meeting right now, and she's going to be coming after her meeting. Then, as I said, we'll follow through the rest of the agenda, discussing transfers to reserves, area rating, borrowing costs, the donation list, and a few minutes about the house and dam. Also, I wanted to point out, Sharon and I have been talking, and we've had word back from the engineer on our well project in Blythe, and it's quite likely we're going to have a special meeting before the end of March to award that tender to stay on track. So I'm just giving you a flag. It's a whole month away, but at some point between the council meeting on March 21st and March 31st, we will need to have a special, very short council meeting for that, but Sharon will keep you posted on that. I just wanted to give you a flag. Okay, so this evening then, we're going to start with the page 7, which is your general government budget. And I just wanted to point out a few things there over on the 2016 side. So there's not a whole lot of change there. On the revenue side at the top, the biggest thing that we've been talking about for quite some time is a decrease in our unconditional grant for the OMPF. Also at the bottom, under the physician recruitment of $36,000, I just received that new figure, and I think it's down about $3,000. So for the next round that you get, there'll be a slight decrease there. So other than that, I'd like to review my year-to-dates as the other department heads are, and if there's any other small adjustments in there, we'll make those for version 2. So is there any questions on the general government section? Trevor.
I think you asked, or I've asked this question before, but I need clarification. What is payments in lieu? What's that line?
Payments in lieu? So those are actual tax bills that we send out, and instead of being called taxes, they're called a payment in lieu. So there are a variety on the assessment roll, a variety of properties actually are classified, instead of say industrial or commercial taxes, they're classified as a payment in lieu. So things like the post office, so the LCBO, the any sort of ministry type facilities are what gets allocated a payment in lieu of taxes. So it is taxes. It's calculated the exact same way, the building assessment times either the commercial or the industrial rate. And so it's the very same. It only has to do with a different classification, as they're mostly provincial and federal buildings.
So does that mean we actually get money from them, or
That's
it's
the same.
It's the same, it's just classified differently than from taxes?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's set by impact, is it?
The classification, the tax class, which gives them the class of say one of their classes is commercial CG rather than ours, which is CT. So it's just a different tax coding, but the rates and that are all the same. So.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so then, as I said, there is, we have a number of debt payments that we pay as part of general government. We're going to have a whole section later on what our debt obligations are, and so we'll carry forward with that then. So is there anything further on general government? If not, we're going to move over to the next page, page 8, which is your council budget. So I actually have reduced your council budget slightly for 2016. We will have to watch that carefully because in light of your new announcements, you may have more meetings in the next little while. So we'll definitely monitor that, but I think we're still okay that we have dropped the budget from 115.5 down to 107.5. So the historical numbers support that. So for first round, that's what I was going to recommend. Is there any questions on that? Okay, if not, I'm going to move to the administration budget, which is on page 9. Okay, so in the administration budget at the top under revenue, we don't normally have a lot of revenue, but there is an in and out item there, which is the pertaining to the theater. Pat explained to you in her part at the bottom under capital that the total project cost is $120,000 and that money would all come out of reserve. So that's just an in and out. And then the other item under revenue is we've talked about proceeding with phase 2 of our asset management plan, and we plan on using gas tax funds to pay for that. So it is listed as an expenditure in the bottom part of our section, and then it's offset by that $21,000. So there's technically no expense to the taxpayers on that part. So the rest of the administration covers all the full-time salaries for this office and the benefits that go with that, clothing and uniform, meeting allowance, subscriptions and memberships. A couple of things here that follow everyone, really every department has a play in, and that really is the insurance deductible expense. So I always like to point that one out to you because, as you know, when we raised our deductible to $10,000, we do experience the odd claim where it could be $2,000 or $3,000, and we don't know whose department that might be or whatever. So this is where we pay those claims. As you will notice, last year we had more of those than normal, so we actually ended up spending $19,000 as opposed to $15,000, which is normal. But there was some one-offs in there, so I'm not concerned that that's going to be a consistent need to raise those funds. Also, we talked there at the bottom, the development charges study for $18,500 with what Sharon and Nancy are working on. I'm sure there's going to be some HR recruitment costs associated with that. So we have $10,000 in there. And then again, the $21,000 for the asset management plan for phase 2. And then Pat talked to you about the town hall building and the capital parts of that. So is there anything on the administration section that council has any questions on?
Trevor.
Donna, based on the announcement with the shared services with Morris Turnberry, has this salaries budget encompassed those potential savings in hours or whatever from the last 6 months of the year?
Not as of yet.
Okay.
So we don't anticipate in year 1 there's actually going to be a savings because there's going to be some implementation costs involved.
Yeah.
So Nancy and I met with Ben Cornell this week. We're still working through some of those, and we're going to be making a presentation to the working group on Friday, and we're going to continue to work out some of those numbers. So we'll get them into the budget as soon as we can. We're just working out some of the details still.
Yeah, I think my question was just to make sure that obviously the implementation costs are there, but they're not going to show up in salaries. I just want to understand if the salaries were encompassing of the changes that we're anticipating. I know there's not going to be a lot in 16, but there was some thoughts that there would be some changes or adjustments
Yeah.
based on
So
on
there
that?
would be some initial savings in year one, however, those would be offset by
By
the
implementation,
implementation
yeah.
costs.
Yep.
So we're looking at some strategies around that, to sort of buffer that over some time perhaps.
Yep.
And so we'll be coming forward with some further information on that. Most of those are gonna be in the public works area, not within the administration.
Right.
So for version 2, our plan is that those numbers would be available as much as we can.
Yes.
And then we'll work those into version 2 before you have a look at that.
Okay.
Okay?
Yep.
Okay, and then if you flip over to page 55, which is your planning and development, planning and zoning budget. So in this budget, we receive money for tax and zoning certificates and various planning applications, and those are really hard to judge how many applications and zoning certificates you may get in a year. And then we also allocate $10,000 of the clerk's department time or CAO time to this department because of the work done on zonings. And the big thing here is we've always put in $40,000 for whether it turns out to be some form of engineering, architect, legal, anything to do with development that may protect the municipality's interest, and so we need outside sources. So that's what that money has typically been used for. Some years we use a lot of it, some years we don't use that much of it, but it's certainly an important part of the budget to be able to have that available for development. So is there anything else in any of those budgets that anyone has any questions on? Okay, if not,
Sorry, Dawn.
sorry, Trevor,
Just
yeah.
what in the 5-year average, what would the average engineering cost be? Like I know, like you said, 14 was 32 and this year was 1,700. Like are we talking, is 40 kind of the average or what we're anticipating? Like I know the fact is with the director of public works that is in the making, some of the engineering costs, I know a lot of that's looking for public works and stuff and infrastructure stuff, but can some of that be offset in this stuff as well?
Yeah, so with the new director, they wouldn't be doing peer review of development applications. So I think going forward, we are looking at a new process for how we handle some of the engineering review of development. In the past, we maybe haven't recouped as many costs as we could have from developers.
Yep.
And so we're establishing a process where maybe if we have an inquiry from a developer, we will have an initial meeting for free with, some general engineering advice, but they know that from that point forward, they are going to be footing the bill for engineering review. And so we're hoping that that is going to help this budget by having more cost recovery on these things. So I wouldn't say that the new director is going to have an impact on this budget because we're always going to be having a third party doing that engineering review, but it should be recoverable by the developer.
Okay, good.
We've set that all up and we've started using it. We set it up probably in the fall. So we've started billing out a number of customers for various things. And so they're going to have bills to pay.
Okay.
Okay, so if there's nothing further on those sections, then I'm going to turn it over to David. David, do you want to use my laptop or do you have, what would you like to use?
I'll bring my own.
Okay.
Nothing against your laptop.
Nope, that's fine.
So,
I'll unplug you.
no, I'll just let you pull up the budget there. I'll just get mine for the notes.
Oh, okay, sure.
So we look at the fire department budget. The thing that makes our fire department unique to anyone else in the province is I'm the only fire chief I know of who the majority of my budget is actually not my own municipality. And so currently our budget structure is 51% contracted services and 49% North Huron. which basically means that while I work for North Huron, in essence, I work for a whole lot of people. Our budget structure is set with our partners so that every year we don't have to renegotiate and review and redo our budget. And when we build our budget, there are some certain parameters that were used for that. And some of those parameters will make life tough as we go forward, but it's reality. Our budget was based on the long-term average of 130 fire calls per year. So that's not just a 1 or 2 year. That's like a long-term. Before Blythe and Windermere were on their own, incorporated into a kind of average number. In 2014, we went to 194 calls. In 2015, we went to 152 calls. So for our wages section of our budget, it flows on a 4-year average. So you have to have some parameter. I'm not a big fan of pulling numbers out of the air. So if you ever want to see, my entire budget is driven by data that backs up where the numbers come from. The catch with that is that our 4-year average is now 151 calls per year on a budget structure that was aiming for 130. When you go to 21 more calls a year, you use more fuel, you incur more maintenance costs, and at the same time, with our budget structure with our partners, our budget increase for 2016 will be 1.6% from 2015. Stuff we have done and implemented to make it work in terms of managing. A rule of thumb in businesses is if you want to manage your costs, you take a small percentage of your biggest cost. And our biggest cost is labor. So we're managing our labor to be more efficient in terms of how we pay our guys and in terms of how they work. But the bottom line for us is that our budget is tight. Always was, always will be. In my notes, you'll see that our capital reserve fund will be short for this year because we had to buy a tanker for a year early. It will recuperate and be on target for 2020 purchase of another fire truck, which is the next one due. That also means in our next contract cycle with our partners, we can adjust for any shortfall caused by the Canadian dollar. In 2014, Council agreed to let us put ourselves on a list for a factory demo truck. Our preferred fire truck vendor happens to provide the fire trucks to the Daytona Speedway in Florida. And every year they sell demonstrator trucks that spend a year at the track at highly reduced prices. We are on the list for 2020 for that, have been for 6 years. If we choose not to exercise that option, that's fine. So lots of others would take it. But that will help our buying power when we get there. As well, when, as I was starting, we implemented an operating reserve because one of my concerns with our budget is that if we have a year with 194 calls, we've got a fixed budget. Where's the money come from? So we set up an operating reserve of $50,000. The two consultants that reviewed our budget structure going forward thought that was more than enough. And in the year where we went from 130 to 194, we used $65,000 more than expected. The way we fund our operating reserve is by surplus. If we have a year where there's money left, it goes to the operating reserve. We also collect funds from Firemark and from insurance companies for services provided. All of that money goes straight into the operating reserve budget. Should that budget at some point get to over $50,000, again, that money is dispersed proportionally to all of our partners. What that means for us in 2016 is we should see our operating reserve budget no longer negative if those funds play out. It's going to have to be 50,000, but at least we don't have a reserve budget for operations. It's in reserve. As council is sort of aware, one of my bugaboos is cancer in the fire service, partly because of John Black, partly because all the statistics are ugly. The city of Fort Erie currently is being audited by the Ministry of Labor because of the high rate of presumptive cancer cases they've got. And one of the things that was zeroed in on is what are you doing about your diesel exhaust in your fire stations? Last year we sold Rescue 3, which was a truck that was in essence redundant within the Wingham station. Those proceeds go to North Huron, not to our partners. The way it happens with the disposal of assets is all of the current fleet that was purchased prior to or purchased upon FDNH being established are being paid for still by North Huron. Assets have been bought subsequent to our amalgamations department. If we dispose of those, the proceeds get dispersed amongst the partners or go into operating reserve. But assets are purchased by us to establish this our property of North Huron, and we're still paying for them. Some money becomes North Huron only. Our partners will not pay for fire station capital costs. They'll pay for capital costs for trucks, equipment, operating costs, but they will not pay towards the cost of the Wingham station, nor the Blythe station. My proposal is with the sale of Rescue 3 is to use some of those proceeds to put a proper diesel exhaust system in our Wingham station, where there currently is none. And ironically, the system that we're looking at is the one that Fort Erie is using. I wasn't aware of that, but they were used as a reference. And the preferred one is actually the least expensive of the ones that I've found in the marketplace. But what I really like about it, now that I know Fort Erie is doing it, is if it survives a Ministry of Labor audit for air quality, I know that we'd have the proper system or the proper type of system. And that would still leave some of the proceeds from Rescue 3 for North Huron for future consideration. A few things that I flag, because I want you to be aware, not just of now, because our budget is what it is. There's really not much we can do unless we want to open up partner contracts, and I really would prefer not to go there. But everything we buy is US dollar based, and I mean everything from fire hose to air packs, all of our fire trucks. The Canadian dollar going down as it has, and yes, it's at 73 cents today again, but that's a far cry from par. That makes our operations more expensive. That's a reality. We're in a good position in terms of equipment and where we're sitting, but as we continue to go forward, that will rear its head when we go to open up our contracts in the next round. When the Blythe Fire Board bought Tanker 8 for our fire department, it was by far the cheapest truck. And unfortunately, it's probably the most expensive truck they ever bought. It's been a non-stop litany of issues from day one. And our latest problem is that all fire tankers have a lining inside the metal tanks, if it's a metal tank, to make sure the metal doesn't corrode, because you're putting in sometimes water from municipalities, sometimes from rivers. The liner inside tank Air 8 is starting to flake off. Does not affect it. It started to flake off 2 house fires ago, and it still works fine on an operational day-to-day basis. The problem is that does shorten the lifespan of the truck if you don't repair it. But when the liner's flaking off, you have to peel off the existing liner to put in a new one, because you can't put a liner on top of one that's flaking off, but the new one will flake off too. There will be a report to council later on in March when we get a sort of a review of what our options are. But just a heads up that some way, somehow that's going to be an issue. And one of the options would be just to let it go, and when the truck fails, it fails. And that'll be a report coming, but just watch out for that. So I've got all this stuff going on with our budget that makes it tight. And then in 2015, FDNH was assessed about $13,000 in unanticipated workers' comp costs. And we actually, when you look at our year-end budget, considering some of the stuff we had going on, we managed fairly well. But be nice if that happened in January, so we sort of had time to plan for the year. But that's not how it works. So we got through the year, we managed that. But higher workers' comp rates are going to be reflected in all the go-forward budgets, which once again was not anticipated. The other thing I do want to flag, and this is a Pat thing, but our Wingham Fire Station is over 35 years old. Compliments to whoever built it when it was built. For a building of that age, it's in remarkably good shape. And likewise, compliments to our facilities people for keeping it that way. I don't know what end of life cycle repairs and renovations there will be, but there will be. At 35 years, I'm in a 12-year-old house and stuff's starting to fail. There will be stuff like that, and that's a pat thing to look after, but we need to understand that when that station needs repairs, that is North Huron tax money that's not coming from any of our partners to assist in repairing that station. I made a few notes on fire prevention. Some people within the business community are questioning how come in North Huron you pay fire prevention and fire inspection fees and in Morris Turnbury you don't, when it's the same individual doing the same type of inspection. Just depends on which side of the road. Our fee structure for fire prevention reflects a survey that was done in 2014 of several other rural departments that do fire prevention. Our fee structure is comparable to what Howick is, so Howick and North Huron agree we should have something somewhat similar, so it's not a competitive issue. But currently Morris Turnbury fire prevention is free. I would probably suggest that's not how I would operate it, but that's how they choose to do so. With our fire prevention, the one thing several things we've noticed is firstly, inspections take longer than we would expect, or you would consider as a benchmark to do an inspection, because most of these places have never seen a fire inspector before. The other thing we're finding is that after doing an inspection, sometimes it's more time is spent on follow-up meetings and follow-up issues, which historically we never billed for. So we spend an hour doing an inspection of your building, 2 or 3 hours generating a report, and we spend 4 hours in meetings with you trying to figure it out, and you pay for the 1 hour inspection. In this year's fee structure, we do charge for $25 per half hour for follow-up visits, so that I don't feel like my fire prevention officer's time is being exploited because it can be, but also because in some cases we've got 8 hours of follow-up meetings from a 1 hour inspection, and that's taxpayers' money that's being spent by that person for follow-up, and they've asked the same question in 2 to 3 meetings each time. Only concern in fire prevention is in the City of London, they posted for, I believe it was 6 fire prevention officers. They're only able to find 4. There weren't enough applicants to fill the spots, and they're offering very good money, very good benefits. Toronto Fire Service is hiring 25 fire prevention officers a year. Fanshawe College is going to graduate 25 a year from their fire prevention officer program, which is year-long. Ontario Fire College will graduate about 20. So supply and demand would tell you that when there's big demand and low supply, we know what happens to wages. I don't know, and I don't want to know what James makes, but when I look at what we pay, if I divide that by 2.5 days a week, I can figure out using 30% is an easy number for benefits. At some point, if you want to retain a qualified fire prevention officer, which is the only kind you want, you're going to have to be offering wages that reflect the reality of the world around us. And I expect at some point that our cost of fire prevention services will have to go up to reflect the wage reality. So 2016, Morris Turnbury's got their numbers coming in for us. I think for 2017, I do want to do a market study again of what everybody is charging for their various inspections. Hopefully share that with Morris Turnbury and see where they wish to go with that. But as one business person said, well, why do I have to do this in North Huron or Morris Turnbury, but not in XYZ township? And I reminded them that in Brussels, MDL Doors employed over 100 people. And for want of a $200 fire inspection, they lost 100 jobs to their community. If you look at Clinton, they had a Main Street fire, and once you lose these heritage buildings, my very first fire, by the way, is actually right next door here, and you don't get heritage buildings back. And more importantly for me as a fire chief, some of the stuff we are coming across majority of places, vast majority are really good. Little stuff, small stuff, but some of the places we were coming across, if there were a fire, somebody's gonna die. And I'm not doing that to be dramatic, but just flat out, somebody's gonna die. There are businesses right now where the owners have been advised by our fire department and through Sharon and myself, that if your business is on fire, it is too dangerous for my personnel to go in that building and we will stand outside and put water on it, but we cannot go into your building. If we want to preserve our jobs, preserve our main streets, and most importantly, preserve lives, fire prevention is where it's at. We just need to make sure we're providing it in a cost appropriate manner, and as best as possible, consistent with our neighbors in terms of what they're charging. Understanding that there's no municipality that we abut that has any fire prevention officer program.
Question, Trevor?
David, I don't know much about the contract that was done before I became a counselor. Does the contract for revenue from our partners include an adjustment for cost of living or
Yeah.
anything like, just the cost of living? Or
Just the cost of living.
Consumer price index or something?
So we take the rate of inflation in December, which was 1.6%, and that's what it goes up.
And that's what it goes up?
Yeah.
But if your costs go up 3%, then it doesn't cover it, right?
It doesn't cover it.
The other question or the other comment I have is that I think we've understood that the 50,000 operating reserve isn't enough based on past precedents and based on what we've got coming down the pipe with capital reserve for the Wingham station. I'm sure there's, as much as the ESTC is a newer building, it's going to have its own problems and concerns and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, the US dollar is going to dictate a lot of this operating reserve. And if it continues to be as fluctuating as it's going to be until the price of oil figures out what it's going to do, because that's, as much as we don't want to say it as our US dollar as anything, or Canadian dollar as anything about oil, it does. So the energy factor really causes a lot of depression in our the US economy, which then affects our Canadian dollar. $50,000 operating reserve is not going to cover fluctuations in this magnitude. And I think the provincial parliament in Alberta will be a prime example of what happens with the reserves if they're not adequately funded. So I'm concerned with the $50,000 operating reserve as much as there really isn't anything that we can do. But I think in the next round of our discussions about that contract, as opposed to consumer price index, we need to have some type of wage reduction or adjustment on calls or something to that effect that encompasses the exact operation, not because let's be clear, they're making benefit. Our partners are making some benefit when we have 194 calls and we bear the burden, and they're only paying a flat rate. Like that's reality. So we need to figure out ways to encompass that.
As a partial answer to that, we were using the best information we could put together, and those contracts were hard enough to get agreement to. I think that we've got track numbers, we can show where we have to move to, but that was price of getting going.
Well, one of the things that I know our previous council did is we were fairly open with our books and our budget with our partners. Because one of the concerns our partners had is that, what's really in there. And with my spreadsheet, when it comes time to redo these contracts, when these contracts were struck, we still weren't showing our partners the numbers, how they came. When it comes time for contract renewal, it's fairly easy for me at this point to throw up on the screen where our wage number comes from, where our fuel number comes from, and why. And I don't want to suggest that's going to solve all of our problems, but I do think it'll give our partners a little bit more peace of mind that, we are being prudent with their money that they're putting in the kitty. And they're also aware their own fire departments are under pressure for capital purchases because of the dollar. So I don't want to say it's going to be easy, but I'm quite confident and comfortable showing our numbers and where they come from and why. And if somebody wants to challenge us on that, be my guest, because I'll back up all the numbers I've got. And, I'll stand on the podium and tell you why they're right. So, but I do agree. The $50,000 number came from an assumption you'd have 30% more fire calls than normal would be an extreme year. And we wound up with 50% more calls than normal my first year as chief, which really wasn't how I wanted to start out.
Sure.
So when you have a year where you have the extreme call volume and you're going over your operating reserve, most of that is going to consist of wages, right?
That's correct.
So what you're speaking about, Trevor, too, with the capital and the effect of the US dollar on those capital purchases, because most of what you're buying is US based, that's directly impacted by the reserve transfers that we need to have to put away for capital. So I think that is a discussion we have to have with our partners going forward, is that yes, we provide you the service, the manpower for the fire service, but the equipment is also a piece of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that's something that we have to factor into those discussions, and we're going to need to increase our annual reserve transfers to be able to address that issue.
Yeah, and like to me, for the capital stuff, like, in the agreement, I'm just off the top, I'm talking about, pick a rate where the average rate for the last 5 years or whatever, and that's the rate that we put in there. If the rate tends to be lower, our partners need to kick in more money to compensate for the reduction in the rate. Like, they should have to bear some of the burden on those costs, not just FD&H because the exchange rate went to the tanker.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it needs to be a encompassing agreement where we all are sharing in the pain, but we're all sharing in the benefit.
Mm-hmm.
And that's to me should be the underlying agreement, and it should be the fundamentals of the agreement, not that the partners are getting the service, and then when we risk all of that, and when stuff goes awry, like exchange, and that we have no real effect on, we can't change it, who's bearing the cost? The taxpayers of North Huron. And that's not, and technically that's not really fair to the taxpayers of North Huron. So I think as much of the information that you said at the time, I agree that it's what it is. But there has to be more of a discussion about partnership as opposed to have a fight about where the costs are coming from.
Mm-hmm.
Rock.
I agree with that, but as I recall the negotiations, one of the plums that we used to get a deal was that if the costs go over what we anticipated, we'll just absorb those costs. But if the costs are actually less, we'll share the bonus with them. So they had it going well both ways.
Well, the mechanism to fund the operating reserve ensures that there's money going to flow there every year. I pulled up in 2014 with 18,000 minutes of fire calls, and in 2013 with 11,000. You can't accommodate that. But I do think when our operating reserve starts to sort of get itself back on its feet again, that will help some of the big years and little years. Because I'm not sort of inclined to, I've got money left, let's spend it all. That's not really how I fly. So if we don't need it, we're going to put it into the reserve. And when it comes to contract time again with our partners, we'll have to sort of figure this out with them. And my preference be to do it with them as opposed to walk in and say, here you go. No, let's sit down, let's show you what we're doing, and let's figure this out. Because I don't think what we're talking about is unreasonable. But 2016, we're budgeting for 151 fire calls. And we've got our training structured and so forth. And we will get through it. if we have 194 calls, heaven help us, on many fronts. But as of right now, I'm comfortable with our final budget. The one that's in the budget package is based on a slightly lower rate of inflation. Second round, we'll have basically the final budget for the fire department with our year-end numbers, the rate of inflation, and it's a funny way to do a budget because I know what my total has to be. So I already know what my total is. So radio equipment is always their plug number, and whatever money is left, which this year is goes right down to 62 cents worth, goes into the radio budget. But the second round of budgets will be fairly firm and one that I'm comfortable living with in the year ahead.
The only other question I had, David, is there has been a heightened in the media with regards to post-traumatic stress disorder.
Absolutely.
What have we budgeted, or what are we looking at as a program? And maybe that has to do with our benefits or not. I don't know. You know, to me, that's a big thing. I think we need
absolutely.
to establish something from a council perspective about that. Like these are individuals that go home not seeing some good stuff, and we need to make sure they're taken care of and treated with respect with those issues, because it is a mental illness.
Yeah.
We need to make sure we're ensuring that those people have the proper avenues to get help, but also understand that if they need it, it's available.
That actually a really good point, because that's at that and barn fires are at the forefront of sort of what's going on in the fire world right now. We are very fortunate, and that's with a capital V. Gary Clark, who is the United Church minister in Blythe, has been our chaplain for about 5 years now. We, depending on the year, will have him out probably anywhere from 3 to 6 times to meet with our guys after incidents. Gary and myself both have advanced level critical incident stress and management training for personnel. Gary just went out of a church budget to a first responder suicide training program, so you can be aware of that. And 2 years ago, we did have a firefighter who his life circumstances lined up very coincidentally with a bunch of really ugly fire calls he was at in a very short span of time. And while we don't have an employee assistance plan, we used some of our legal budget, and we actually we brought in the critical incident psychologist to debrief the Paul Bernardo investigators many years ago from Newmarket. And he basically put our guy back together again, and he's still in the department. So yeah, you're right on the money. It's very real. Gary's salary to us is probably like $2,000 a year, which is normal consulting. But the guys like him, the guys trust him, and he is truly outstanding with the personnel when things go wrong. Yeah, so good point.
Good.
Okay, so shall we move on to EST?
Certainly. On the EST front, we've got some interesting stuff ahead of us. The Marine Fire Training Program for us is pretty exciting. When they start talking about hundreds of students, I get kind of excited about that. We put in some generic numbers and understand the STC budget you look at. I love budgets that are truly driven by data, so it's not just, oh, last year was this, let's put in this number. With Candace at the STC, we worked up and our data sheet that drives our front end of the STC budget is 24 pages when you print it out. So we truly account for everything. And if the cost of nitrogen goes up, we can change the nitrogen budget. If the cost of propane goes down or up, we can change it, and so forth. A few things that we are that make this first budget a little bit difficult to nail down. While our Marine program is approved, and we plugged in some sort of generic numbers, I've never run a ship fire course to know what they really are. They're doing a dry run next week, and we're going to actually track the costs to do that, so we can plug in true numbers for that and get a handle on what that real number is. So right now the numbers are guesstimates, but after next week we'll know the real number. We're a regional training center for the Public Services Health and Safety Association. They are totally gutting, and I mean totally gutting, how they deliver the programs to regional training centers. And aside from an agenda that I've got for tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock in Toronto, which is brilliant timing commuting from Blythe, I really have no idea what their new costing model is. So we've used some sort of historic stuff. After tomorrow, we'll know when we run a health and safety program for them, this is what you're going to pay, this is what you're going to make. So we'll be able to nail that down better. Land-based marine fire training, which council authorized us to start pursuing last year. The course developer has got a meeting next week, and then one subsequent to that again, and he's going to final costs in terms of what we think the program will cost, so we can plug that into our budget. We're still pursuing a private career college. We've been approved as a campus. A cajillion little things that take time and resources to seemingly button down, but we're still pursuing that. And I don't want to put in numbers for that until I know it's for real what that is. The one thing that's pretty crazy, pretty exciting, and I'll be coming to council because we're going to have to sign a legally binding non-disclosure agreement. We sort of stumbled upon 8 weeks ago, and I've been briefing Sharon on this just because I need someone to share my excitement and at the same time how scared I am. A potentially mind-numbingly large, incredibly hard to imagine coming to Blythe kind of opportunity. I'm like the dog that catches the car after you've been chasing it, now you know what you do. If this were to come to the ESTC into our area, it would, when you find out where we're pursuing, it'll blow your minds. The potential impact of this financially is huge. It's gonna take a ton of work if we even get in the true hunt for this. It'll take a ton of work to get there. But I can't put that on our budget, but it's insane. And it really is. And it's one of those, I called one friend who connected me to another friend, who connected me to another one, and 4 friends later I wound up through the front door of something much larger than I imagined. So there's no pie in the sky in our budget, I guess what I want you to know. And when you get a budget from me, every number will be from something. It's not, I'm totally against the random, oh, look at this, sounds good kind of number. That certainly goes for the ESTC. Last year we actually wound up better than budget for the ESTC. Still not. You're not looking at a surplus and let's go have a cocktail party, but we wound up better than budget. The other thing that's not included in there is a review of the operating structure, governance structure, and a business plan. I don't want to put in a guess value on that. I'll be meeting with Sharon start of the next week to further pursue what that means. But it's for me, it's important we do that. And the one thing I really want council to understand is I love my job. As crazy as that sounds, I do love my job. But out of the 3 months leading to Christmas, I had 13 days I didn't work. And for my wife and family, they're not real thrilled about that kind of lifestyle long term. I won't do stuff half-assed because that's just not how I'm wired. And when it is sitting sort of partially done or not done properly, I might as well go to work because I'm not going to sleep at night anyway. But part of this review has to be, what does a manageable world look like for this? There's no budgetary value to that, but you have to understand from an operational standpoint that the Sparling household doesn't love my job at this point. And I don't feel like I'm giving adequate service to either the fire or the STC with where I'm at. And when we talk about somebody coming in to review things, they need to help me figure out my life so that I can do a job I'm comfortable with. And at the same time, we don't miss out on opportunities or choke on opportunities that are sitting there for the STC because there's just not enough or they're not the right resources in place. When we submitted our proposal last year to the Economic Development Board, there were a number of projects listed on there. We're making headway in every single one of those, despite no resources other than what we had last year when we proposed it, which is pretty exciting. It's pretty cool when you see after years of work, the Marine program finally comes to fruition. It is pretty cool. A lot of internal high fives on that day. The ESTC has got really neat opportunities before it. No idea if we'll ever land them all or not, but I do believe that I do believe as we continue to go forward that it's going to be good. The one item that is always bothers me, just because my business mindset, is our main building has abundant space that is underutilized. Efforts to make better use of this, we need to figure out what that is and what that looks like. But the bottom line on EST is that whether the building is full or empty, the building still costs us. And when we're looking, and I know council, there's discussion about assets and asset utilization. We've got a very new, very spacious facility that can accommodate more than it currently does, and we're paying for that empty space. I don't know what that looks like, but certainly part of the 2016 has to be addressing what do we want to do with that space. Other than that, the budget's before you. Second round will be much firmer because I've got the data to feed the machine better after next week or so.
There's two things I think that we've talked about the ESTC before, and I think we need to reaffirm as council. I think one, we need to, the information that we're getting from the Huron County Economic Development Board is we need to invest in our proposals before they're going to invest in them. And I think from everybody's sanity, part of that means we have to hire somebody to take some of the burden from David. We can't sustain what the issues we're dealing with today. There's too much work ahead of us. The revenue potential is too great. And, we can't risk the issues that we potentially could have with our partners because David's buried in the ESTC trying to get revenue. We can't have that, in my opinion. I think at some point, by investing in the programs, we have to. That's going to initiate some more firm belief from individuals and employees that this is here to stay, and there is some hesitation for some people to apply to that job because they don't know if it's going to last 6 months, 6 years, 6 days. But we as council need to reaffirm that is, with the potential risks or revenue and upstreams that we could get, this could be a viable solution. And by just having David go through it, I don't think we're doing him any justice, and the council's not doing any justice, and the staff aren't doing any justice. So, from an economic development board standpoint, I think we have to invest in it, and then we'll see some payback from Huron County. But I don't see us getting any of that before we put our money towards our discussion and kind of give David some help, because I don't think it's not sustainable. We're gonna find ourselves in a whole heap of trouble if we continue down the same path.
Well, if my wife comes knocking at your door about
If there's anybody knocking on anybody's door, it'll be my own wife.
I think Neil can reaffirm that, that was some of the conversation that we had with the members of the ECDEV board when we had that meeting is, we need to look at, is there a sustainable building or a business model for that facility? And that's going to mean right-sizing the expenses to the program. So how much of that building really should be attributed to the actual program, what is needed? And we know we have excess space there, and we're going to have to deal with that separately. And we have brainstormed that as a management team, and I think we still need to keep that in mind, that there is some excess space in that building that we're going to have to try to find something to do with, and hopefully something that can generate some revenue. Looking at the business model, what is the right size of expenses towards the program, and would that program be viable, and what resources do we need to adequately run the program? So as David said, we need to chase business. And does he have adequate time to chase the business? And we don't want to be put in a position where we're missing opportunity because he's dealing with his other duties as the fire chief as he should be. So, it's not a core municipal business. We've decided that we're going to be in this business. So are we going to resource that business adequately to be able to make it viable? And that's the question on the table at the end of the day. And I think that's what we're trying to achieve through creating this business plan.
Right.
It's almost the same issue as we discussed with the museum, really, in a sense. Are we in that business or are we in this business? It's a matter of planning and making a business case for the museum.
The only problem is, Brock, is that this has a lot more revenue upstream than the museum could.
Oh, for sure.
So the fact is you're never going to potentially make money at the museum. You could make money at the ESTC, and that is a viable program. If I will tell you right now, if items 1 to 6 weren't on this sheet, that we had any perspective in revenue, I think the conversation would be a whole lot different. It would be a whole lot different from what we're actually planning on that ESTC building. But there's so much revenue potential here that I think we'd be looking the wrong way if we just turn an eye and just let it go. There's too much opportunity there.
I strongly agree with the opportunities that I know that I'm familiar with a number of them. I guess not all of them, but yes, and it's one of those things that just the things that we have there right now lend themselves to moving forward and getting certification and being able to get the proper instructors doing the courses, etc., to really make it a paying proposition. Okay.
Okay, so we'll move on then to emergency planning then, which is the last module.
This is a big one. This is basically our CEMC budget. And the only thing I would flag there is that there are ongoing discussions about a countywide CEMC program, which I would strongly encourage council to consider and support as long as it's reasonable. It works well in Perth County, works in Middlesex, and I'd be a big advocate for that. This budget's small. Most of my budgets are spreadsheet driven. I'm not going to drive a spreadsheet for a $5,000 budget because these numbers are fairly straightforward. And I don't know where the county process is at or what that looks like or what the timetable might be. But it is possible that before this budget cycle is done, that there's a changeover and we're contributing towards a county-wide system as opposed to mostly in-house. And what those dollars could be, I wouldn't know.
Okay, any questions on emergency planning?
Got off you, dude.
Which is good because my battery light is flashing. So.
Okay, so then Connie is going to be along shortly. So we're going to move to transfers to reserves. So you had, they're on your e-scribe there. You can just come up and do it. Do I have it too big? Do I need to zoom it down? Okay, so I'm gonna grab my. Oh, Connie, do you want to? Are you ready to jump right in then? Sure. Or do you want to do that and get the budget parts finished up then? So I'll just flip over here to your budget. So just before Connie gets started, then the one nice thing about her budget this year is the last couple of years, the budgets have, there is some distortion in her budget again this year, but we were working on all those special projects, and so they came with a bunch of grant money in and out and all over the place. So anyway, so it was really, her budgets, you know, would go up a couple $100,000 at the end at the year, you know, from the year before. And so anyway, it was very difficult to compare apples to apples. So other than one particular item here, Connie's back that her budget is more of what you're used to seeing from Connie. So, okay, Connie, take it away.
What do you want me to do, Donna?
Okay, well, if you just want.
Where do you want me to start?
Okay, well, I think just really if we touch on some of the highlights there. So the salaries and wages and the part-time is we apply for a student over there. I'm not sure at this point if we're getting a student or what's happening over there, but that has been in the plan. One of the main things, Connie, is that we always talk about in a bit of a depth is the advertising and promotion, because that's where the partnership funds with Blythe Festival are. So if you could explain that.
So this year, the Blythe Festival is actually looking, their strategy is targeting London and Kitchener a little bit closer. But that is their target this year. They have requested 12,500. They had come here and asked for 12,500. We have just completed our draft pages for the brochure, where we have got focusing this year on encouraging people to come, expanding the shoulder season. Actually, one of our pages says we have big shoulders, using the theater lingo, talking about considering making your home here and getting to know the North Huron that locals know. So talking about some of our festivals and other events that happen. So that is the focus, our focus for those 4 pages. So, and as you know, those just that partnership helps us reach a much larger audience than we could on our own, and it also helps Blythe Festival mail out to a larger audience than they could without us. So it's a great partnership. Kind of highlighted some of the tourism stuff. I've broken it down to, I mean, we've always we advertise in Blue Water Guide, day tripping stops along the way, Hidden Garden. That's sort of some of our external stuff. Internally, we do the phone books, Blythe and Wingham. In those dollars is our HTA signage, highway signage comes out of there. Community advertising includes the smaller things like volunteer appreciation, graduation, sports, etc. It includes Threshers, our partnership for the Threshers, Silver Stick, Elementary School Fair, and then $1,100 for the CKNX radio ads that we pre-purchase every year. They have their special one-day sale at the end of the year. So we have a week in March that we can certainly use. This year, we're probably going to, unless you have other ideas, really concentrating on probably stuff coming out of our industrial land strategy or our employment land strategy, again, or even the strat plan, economic development strat plan, probably highlighting why you want to work and live and play in North Huron. So a couple of years ago, CKNX wrote us some really great commercials that got a lot got a lot of feedback from the public, so maybe revisiting that kind of message again. So that's for advertising.
Trevor?
So the one question I've always had about this advertising promotion, I understand the Blythe Festival because that reaches a lot more of an area that we aren't able to provide. But as an economic development, I think of outside our borders. I don't think about the stuff inside our borders. Like I think if you're living in North Huron, having an ad in the local phone book or whatever, like I don't see that as benefiting economic development. Like if people live in North Huron, they already live here.
Except the message is totally different, Trevor. So unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess, economic development in a small municipality, it takes on more than just, attraction and retention. It also, in my position, we also do internal communications and getting the message out. So the message for the stuff that is more closely at home is not tourism based or come and spend time based. It's more giving recognition to the volunteers and the events that happen locally. Again, Threshers, Silver Stick Elementary School Fair, it's that partnership and kind of helping those community events take place.
So when you talk about economic development, it's not just economic development, it's economic development and community-based.
Well, economic development takes in a whole lot of things. So it's not just attraction and retention. It's certainly community capacity building is a large part of economic development in a small municipality.
Right, and I think what I'm saying is that's the communication we need to let ratepayers understand.
Yeah.
Because when everybody talks about economic development, they're not talking about what the businesses we have here today. They're talking about new businesses and new money coming in. Mm-hmm. The problem is with that is if you ignore the people who are already spending the money, they tend to get a little cranky as well. So I think it's in one respect, I understand it. I think more of a targeted audience things in a year might be more beneficial than what we've always done. Maybe every year we pick a target audience and that's what we focus on. And then next year we switch, as opposed to, we've always put ads in the paper, we've always done this, we've always done that. I think we got to start looking outside the box on ways to make our money go a little farther.
Okay.
So also then, Connie, if you just explain, so for the $4,500 is our ongoing support to the Alice Munro Writers and Readers Festival, plus $1,000 for the
contribution to phase 2 of the county-wide job creation partnership. A few months ago, we actually council agreed to write a letter of support for phase 2 for that project through MTCU. Right now, the concept paper is still being looked at by IMTCU, so it hasn't been passed yet. So we won't know about that. I don't really know. They haven't given me a time frame, but we certainly don't know if that has been passed yet. So what that will actually allow us to do, the next phase of this Creative Countryside JCP, they are looking at this round. They have 13 positions around the county. Next round, they're actually looking at probably doing only 5 and really concentrating on some of the bigger projects. So with our $1,000, if we are successful, or if the project is successful, we would get somebody looking at the Alice Munro LMP, moving those projects forward for 42 weeks. So we would have a person on site for 42 weeks looking at moving forward those goals that were identified in the LMP.
42 weeks for $1,000? Wow. Are they here an hour a day?
No, they're here full time.
And then the next one, Connie, the 6,000 special projects.
So special projects. I mean, we have put down there. I've noted the industrial land strategy, the employment land strategy, and projects resulting from economic development strat plan. So some of the things that we're identified In strat plan in particular is a job fair, recruitment package, helping some of our local businesses do some recruiting, which really the missing piece seems to be selling the lifestyle or convincing them that it's a great place to bring your family as well. So what we're looking at is $6,000 there to really probably identify further down the road where we're going to use that. Another thing is we talked about Industry Connects. We have hosted that in North Huron before. It looks like it'll probably be at a different municipality this next year, but it will be going on again, but taking that opportunity to engage our youth and looking at certain opportunities like that. It looks like that as a result of this, the strat plan, they will actually be separating out the career fair from the job fair and doing more targeted youth education on what is available locally, and then probably working more closely with our businesses who need help in recruiting and attracting people to the area. So.
So other than that, the big item that you're going to come back to is the community partnership. And so you have that on your eScribe, and that is your list of current donations and requests that you've been asked for to date throughout this budget process. So we're going to come back to that, but that's the big item there that's really not under Connie's control. It's council's control and fully decided upon by council, but we're going to come back to that. I have a special section on those donations, and as I said, you all have your list of those requests that we'll be looking at just down the list a little bit here yet tonight. So Connie, do you have any questions for council, or do you have any councilors have any further questions for Connie before we move on?
Sharon?
Yeah, I just wanted to make the comment that Connie and I met with Natasha, the Economic Development Manager at the county, and Vicki Lass from OMAFRA this afternoon. Went over our draft economic development strategic plan, and I think we still have a bit of work to do on that. We've got our goals put together, but I think we need to do some work on actually creating an action plan and looking at which of those priorities are going to come to the top. I spoke to Natasha a little bit afterwards just to find out where the county is at in creating their work plans, because now that they're starting to receive some of the draft strategic plans back from the municipal partners, they're looking at what resources the county is going to put towards economic development, how they're structuring their department, and working out some of the work plans and job descriptions for the staff that they're hoping to recruit and reallocate duties within the existing staff. So those work plans aren't public yet, but I think that economic development across the county is going to continue to evolve over the next year. And I think we need to wait and see which of the things, the priorities are going to be of a regional sort of scope, and whether the county is going to resource some of those and which things we would be working on locally. So I think for this year, we should sit down and pick a couple of priorities, and that's why we've put some funds in the budget to be able to address some projects that we would be bringing forward to council for your consideration to start on. But I also think as we work forward on our shared service project with Morris Turnberry, we know that some of our development potential is in partnership with Morris Turnberry as well. And so I think eventually economic development has to come to that table as well, and we need to have the conversation with them about what are our opportunities and how are we going to work together on economic development in the future. So I think it's going to be a work in progress, and we're going to evolve over the next while.
Okay, so thank you then, and we'll move on to our next piece then, which is our transfers to reserves. So you had your transfers to reserve posted there on your eScribe. I hope everybody was able to pull that up, and then I have it up on the board here. So I just wanted to make note that I am looking for a motion in preparation for the audit after we've discussed this listing. It's important that we get a motion of council to provide the direction to be able to transfer this money into reserves because it was not part of the budget process. So as you were looking through this list, you will note that a lot of the money on this list is money earmarked for 2016 projects that did not get completed in 2015 or money that belongs elsewhere. And as we've talked this last couple of years, staff are desperate to get some money back into reserves, and we try as much as we can to scrape up any funds possible to put towards infrastructure and asset management. And so therefore we want to take advantage of any positive outcomes unforeseen that we have arrived upon throughout the year. Sometimes we have good luck and sometimes not. As you know, we have an awful lot of leaking roofs and such, so that seems to hinder us in our strive for putting money away. And again, a lot of the revenue sources that we have, you know, especially the ones, well, especially like the cemetery and daycares and some of those, they're very hard to predict on the revenue stream, how many children or what services are going to be required there. So once we do these year-end transfers, we do devote time at one of the scheduled budget meetings to go through the whole reserve list item by item. And for me, it's something that's really important that you guys understand what's in reserves, how did it get there, and what are our plans to do for that. So again, that will be done after we go after this list, and as we settle through the rest of our budget meetings, we'll devote some time to that. So I want to go through this listing with you and just give you a bit of a background on where some of these projects ended up. And the department heads aren't here tonight, so they would have a bit better information from me on the where these numbers came from, but I certainly have all the backup here as well. So the first one is the police rifles. They had budgeted for carbines this year, and they finished up with about $2,000 less in cost. So the chief has requested that $2,000 go back into a reserve for other equipment. Also, as customary, the police chief had talked to you a couple of years ago about the importance of setting up a legal reserve, because you never know at any point when that may be necessary. So anytime that he has unused legal funds in his budget, he requests that be transferred forward. The next two, it's quite surprising. Pat, as she explained to you when she was in, that she always budgets $20,000 for general facility repairs and $20,000 to put towards additional town hall renovations here. Normally, as I said, with all the problems with the aging buildings, some building usually uses up that $20,000, and not that it wasn't needed this year, but instead what she's going to do is transfer this forward into reserves and then disperse it in some of the manner of the presentation that she gave you with all those projects that she's working on to come forward over the next couple of years. So the next one is the $14,775 for the Care Partners building. So that was the building that we tore down out in East Wallanosh. So if you remember, you had $26,500 in reserves. You were going to do a bunch of work out there to replace the windows and the roof. And then when the tenant gave notice that they were leaving and you investigated the condition of the building, the decision was made to pull the building down. So this money is what's left, and Pat will be using some of this money also to, in the spring, to finish up the last few things that are done there. And then when that's done, this money will be unclaimed, so it would be eligible to be moved for another project. Kathy's daycare reserve, the $31,250. They always plan their budget to take that money out of reserve so that they either mitigate or reduce their anticipated deficits. And then if they do better than hoped, then they transfer that money back into reserve. So that's been done for several years, and so that's what they're suggesting again. Also, the daycare received an additional $1,000 for wage enhancement, which the gals would like to put forward to the roof reserve. And there was a reconciliation done late in the year, again for $3,712 for the daycare that was suggested to be put forward. Also, when Val was here talking to you, she explained to you how well the revenue has come in. And so therefore that has resulted in $20,000 that she wants to put forward. And I think what her plan and Kathy's plan is to put that also against the roof project for 2016. And then part of their budget was to have $4,500 come out of reserves to do some paving at the daycare, and it didn't take all of that. So they're wanting to put $2,200 back in. And the same with Val spoke to you about the early years project, which is fully funded by the county, and they give you about over $80,000, and any money that's not spent there goes back into a reserve for future use for those programs. One unexpected item is David was talking to you about the proceeds received on the sale of the fire truck, and that he wants to make use of that. I need to talk to him about that and just take a different look at some of our reserves, because we actually, as you know, we still owe money on that. So we're going to have to, David and I'll have another discussion next round before how we're going to fund what he wants to do and what we can do with this. So for sure we'll work together on that.
Bring the boxing gloves.
So the wayfinding signs, which was money that came from homecoming, wasn't completed, so it's scheduled for 2016. The house and dam, you gave permission for $15,000 to be taken out of the house and dam reserve for the engineering. And with the money that was received through that Heritage grant, only about a net of $6,000 was used, so we're able to transfer this $8,400 back to the house and dam reserve for future decision making there. Pat talked to you about her roof repairs. She had $33,000 budgeted in the 2015 budget and only spent about 11 or 12, so she wants to transfer this 20 back into add to the 2016 budget. Same with the library. She had planned to do about $23,000 work over at the library, and only a small portion of it would get done. So she would like to pull this money back out of reserves to finish that project up in 2016. For the museum, there was some work she was doing over there, and again, the project came in less, so there's $5,300 there. Blythe Parks, the deficit was less. There was still a deficit, but less than budgeted, less by about $9,000. So she would like to transfer that forward. The same for the Blythe Campground. And so she would like to transfer that deficit. As you know, we have an accumulated debt associated with the Blythe Campground. When we did all those renovations there quite a few years ago for the hydro services, we still owe $59,000, so we would be able to put this $9,000 towards that deficit and try to eat away at that. Pat explained to you that this year was basically the first time her rec programs had seen a surplus, and quite a nice surplus, much more than budgeted, so she would like to put that forward for to investigate new programs over the next few years. In rec admin, the same thing, and complex admin down below. Each of the departments are finding that they are running into various situations where they do have to seek legal advice. So in both cases, Pat didn't need to use her allocation, so she would like to transfer the $4,000 and the $1,400 forward and actually set up a legal reserve, which is the same thing as what Tim does for the police department. So it's definitely a sign of the times there. In addition to that, then there was $11,000 that Pat wanted to move forward for her business equipment. In speaking with her when she was here, she talked about a number of copiers and her software and all of those things that she's planning to undertake as part of 2016. So she wants to be able to put that money forward. One of the big things was the Arena W. So we received more revenue there. Actually, Morris Turnberry for both the Arena W and the Blythe Arena had forwarded us more money than what we anticipated as a contribution. So that is part of this, and so we wanted to set it aside as well. And in the pool complex, Pat explained her whole pool liner scenario and the ongoing costs that are going to be associated with that. So she would like to put this money forward for that, as well as the $6,000 that was the deficit was less than budgeted, and she would like to put that for those roof repairs as well. So switching over to Hall B then in Blythe, Arena and the Hall, the two pieces there, both of those had deficits less than budgeted. But again, some of that was because we got increased revenue as a contribution from Morris Turnberry. So that was great. The museum building, Pat talked to you about the quite the difference in the budgeted amount for switching over to natural gas. So as you know, the museum needs quite a lot of work, so on various fronts. So she wanted to put the $11,000 forward. David talked to you briefly there about his emergency planning. David would like to eventually get a generator, so any little bits of money we can scrape up there, we've put forward to try to purchase a portable generator. For our annual gas tax amount, we get $141,000 every year. We had planned to spend $38,000 on the Moncrief Road project, which we did, and so the rest of it we're saving, and all of it will be used in 2016 on the Westmoreland project in Blythe. So that will all go ahead. We're just still receiving some outstanding invoices, but each year we budget $40,000 for our contribution to the Blythe landfill site. And the last of the bills came in just this afternoon. So we still will be able to pay that last $5,000 bill and transfer $22,833.97 forward to our long-term landfill closure account. So we continue to move money into to take care of closure costs whenever possible. The $42,000 Heritage Theater donations, that's not our money. We've collected it. It's sitting in our revenue accounts, but we have to put it into a reserve until they proceed with the project, and it will offset the capital. So again, that's not our money. We received a WSIB near refund of $1,700, so we wanted to put that forward. Tim and the CBO had not used all his office supplies, so I think there's something in particular that he wants in 2016, so he requested that go forward. The 14-19 trillion balance, again, that's not our money. It's money that we had to hold the Trillium grant on behalf of 14-19, and then as they spend it, we dole it back to them. So this $31,000 doesn't belong to us. It's actually their money, and we're the administrators for them. Trevor touched a little bit on that engineering, planning, zoning, whatever he wanted to call it, and as Sharon said, we've set up a new process whereby we bill back all the developers that we can, whether it be for zoning or development inquiries or architects or whatever. There still will be, though, the odd situation where we run into that we have to protect the municipality's interests, and we need some outside assistance with that. So with Sharon working on some of those land strategies and some of that kind of things, we have to make sure that there's money available so that the developments can go forward, but yet the municipality's interests are protected. So that's what that's for. Kelly, the next two, Kelly had, he had really tightened things up again this year. he was over on some things, but as I said, in close penny pinching the rest of the year, he was able to come up with 60,000 for public works and to put forward for infrastructure projects and equipment, and 50,000 forward for the waste department. So, and 35,000, he was talking to you about the increased revenue that we were fortunate enough to receive at the cemetery, which you can't really count on that, but because we did get that extra revenue, he wanted it put forward because there's a number of projects out there he was talking to you about, whether it be the pavement, the chapel, and so on. And also then for streetlight capital, of course, there's lots of work he wants to do on LED projects, so he wants that to go forward. And then as David mentioned earlier there, the EST budgeted to have a deficit, I think, of about 115,000 this year, and it came in as a deficit of 75, so that's actually about 40 better. So I'm proposing to send 20 of that forward to the reserves to offset the accumulated deficit. Over the years, the place has accumulated about 234 in a deficit, so this 20 would be our first start at being able to pay some of that back. So are there any questions on this listing?
The 40,000 the Morris Turnberry gave, that was just pulled from Belgrave or East Monash, right? And gave to Wingham Marina.
I'm not sure where they got it. They gave us extra.
They giving us more money than normal have?
Yes. Yes, not $40,000 though. I believe it was 15 on Wingham and
It's only like 1,000
in Bly.
in July.
So
And 15 less than for Belgrave, right? Yeah.
I don't know what they did with Belgrade.
That's correct, but that doesn't affect this budget, other than what the Township of North Huron sends to the Belgrade Community Center Board.
Yeah, it's just taken from one place and put to the other arena, right? Okay.
So yeah, so there was 15,000 additional revenue to the Wingham, and then there was actually 4,000 more came forward to Blythe. So we wanted to make sure that we got that money put forward because there's so many projects to do as well. Okay, so thank you, Ray, for that question. Trevor, did you have a question?
Yeah, it's more for just the way I think about reserves. So in the budgets, all the reserves are based on obviously the budget that we put in 2014 or 2015's budget, right? So the taxes are based on those expenses that we need to collect on the tax basis, correct?
Yes, but the reserves only figure into that if the department head is suggesting that they pay for a project using reserve funds.
So the reason why I'm saying this is because, sometimes the public gets a false understanding of what reserves mean. And I think, this is prepaying $779,000 in budget money. Some of it wasn't used. So the tax base was paying for that budget that wasn't technically used. When we move it forward, they're not paying it again.
Right.
Like when we use those projects or when we pull those things that are reserved, we're not using new money. So that's the concern that some taxpayers don't really understand about the reserve function, is that we might use the same budget as we did in 15. But because of the thought process is there's lots of infrastructure and stuff that needs to happen, and we're not continually using new money to build that infrastructure. So I think it's really clear when you see the transfers in and out sheet that the public should see, because I think that's really going to understand what the net impact of the tax basis is when you don't realize what these reserves are.
I think as we go forward too, and we get a real handle on our asset management, we can look at each individual budget area, at each individual facility, and say, what do our annual reserve transfers need to be? in order to sustain that facility over the long term. So if we had a capital plan for each facility that showed when the roof needed to be replaced and when boilers needed to be replaced, and really dig down and componentize those facilities, we'll have a greater understanding of what our annual reserve transfer needs to be. And I think that's a good justification to the public as well, to see that we're still not meeting that infrastructure deficit. So I do think it is a good practice, though, when you have individual department budgets that for some reason you've performed better, maybe you've saved, to be able to allocate that money into the reserve. I think it gives a greater incentive for department heads and staff during the year to be able to try to find those efficiencies if they know any savings that they have is going to go into the reserve to sustain the facility over the long term.
And a number of those, maybe the job didn't get fully completed, so that we'll just be paying it as it gets completed, because it wasn't completed by the end of the year as well.
I think the other point that I was also trying to make, though, is the one-time things, we need to be careful about how we budget. Because the one time that hiccup one year that we hit may not happen every year. And if we're just looking at the last year or the year before, and they just happen to be in those 2 years, and we budget that, you know, if you're robbing the taxpayer now for future gain, are you really gaining anything? Because all you're gonna do is get really mad taxpayers because you really didn't need that money. And I understand we need it for infrastructure, but to say it was going for a budget, but then we're using it for infrastructure later, doesn't sell that to the public. We need to get, if we're taking it for infrastructure, let's tell them it's for infrastructure right off the bat, and that's what it's for, and not kind of saying, well, we budgeted for legal or whatever the case may be, but because we saved it, let's take it for infrastructure now. It's a sour taste in your mouth if you take it for one thing and then use it for a benefit. I think if we say it's for infrastructure, let's use it for infrastructure and be done with it.
Right, or we do use it for all the things I just outlined. Yeah, it's all specifically laid out where it's gonna go to, but as I said, we're desperate to put money away for infrastructure, so, as Sharon was saying, at the end of the year, if we've had any windfalls, we wanna make sure that it gets put away so that we can start. I mean, these infrastructure numbers that we're supposed to be putting away are millions of dollars per year. There's no way these budgets are going to support those kinds of transfers to reserves, but we have to keep starting and we have to keep working away on it. So,
as we update our asset management plans too, you will see that there will be a recommendation and a strategy in there on how to start bridging that gap. So in our existing asset management plan, there would be a recommendation to say that, we would recommend a tax increase of X amount per year put specifically toward infrastructure, to be able to start bridging that infrastructure deficit. We do have a challenge because our tax rate is high, and so you have to balance that. I think that's where we see the advantage of something like our shared service project, where we can decrease operational costs and take those savings and shift them to our infrastructure spending. So I think we need to look deeply at operations to see where we can find savings and shift that money over. But at some point in time, we may have to look at implementing a strategy where we're going to have a certain percentage each year that goes specifically to infrastructure as well.
and we tried that 15 years ago. The day we walked in here, we all said, oh yes, we're gonna put 1% of everybody's budget into infrastructure, and that lasted about 1 month. So we didn't get very far with that one, but anyway, we certainly tried, and then that's why we, as I said, we continue to do that. Just to continue on what Sharon's saying is the reason also the asset management plans are so much fun to work with and valuable is so some of our first go rounds basically were calculated on EOL, end of life. So say for example, if you have water mains at 75 years or whatever, so, and some of them are getting close to that. But where you can change your infrastructure transfers is, of course, is what I've been proposing all along, is actually do some inspections of those and find out really what is the condition. And so will they last longer than the anticipated end of life? Some may not. So then, of course, too, you get into all your methods of reconstruction. So you can evaluate, do you need to reconstruct the whole sewer line, or can you do some relining and some of those types of things? And so once we saw our big numbers in our first plan, and we all went, how are we possibly ever going to find these millions of dollars to replace all our assets? When all said and done, North Huron assets on replacements costs will be right around the $200 million. So, I mean, that's a lot of money for us to try to scrape up $5,000 at a time. So anyway, you have to do, that's why our condition assessment and our risk assessments, which we've been working on, are so critical as well, to mix all of that together, and then we get far better data. So anyway, that's a day by day for sure. Okay, so any more questions on this reserve listing?
No, I'm just watching Yolanda scroll.
So may I have a motion then for the auditors to transfer this money into reserves as per this schedule?
I'll move it.
Site and Vaughan. All in favor? Carried.
Okay, thank you. So we're still on time. So now I would like to move over to area rating. So your area rating was on page 6 of your original budgets. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. You folks are all very familiar with your area rating. But the point I was trying to make here is that we're area rating an extra $104,000 this year. 54 to Wingham, 26 to Blythe, and 23 to East Wallanosh, basically because of our increased policing costs. So for the Blythe and East Wallanosh, those were the increased OPP costs that we've been talking about. And then for Wingham, it was increased costs relating to the Wingham police. So that we, as I said, our individual amounts will go up by $54,000 for Wingham, 26 for Blythe, and 23 for East Wallanosh. So when it comes to actually calculating the tax rates, you'll see the difference that those make on each of those individual ward tax levies. Okay, so next on page 57, I want to talk to you a little bit about your borrowing costs. So your borrowing costs are we're in your original budget, but also on your e-scribe, you had a spreadsheet there showing you your total debt that the municipality is still responsible for. So included in this budget is your total debt responsibilities of $249,798. That is $165,489 in principal and $84,308 in interest. So then if you look on your eScribe long-term debt balances sheet, you can see that the EST Center, we still owe $1,048,000. On one of the graders that we purchased, we still owe $184,000. The rink grant, we owe $180,000. The fire payout, $639,000, and some roads projects, $174,000, for a total still that we owe $2,227,000. So the biggest of that, of course, is the EST, and it was a 20-year loan. And again, as David alluded to, that whole loan and the costs and all of that will have to be part of the discussions as they look forward to potential uses and viability of that building. So So anyway, there's really no changes that you can make on that part of it. So now I would like you to move to your donation list. So that was in your e-scribe. Thanks, David. Okay, so at this point, I'm not really, I certainly want council to banter about your donation list. We adopted our new fee waiving and donation policy in last summer, 2015. And we knew there was going to be a learning curve for some of the groups, and it's an ongoing challenge. Council is always receiving heartfelt requests for donation as the various groups come to you and ask for money. But my question is where do we go for money then? Because we have, the province has cut back our OMPF funding, increased our OPP costs. We've had our applications for infrastructure decline. So it makes it very, very difficult for us to manage our budgets as well. So I'm not sure if council is prepared to make a decision on these requests this evening, but we do have to have, if not tonight, we should have some discussion on it. And then at our next budget meeting, we would be looking for some decisions so that these groups, we can send them back some sort of a notification as to where they stand on the request. So I just want to go through these with you quickly. The Belgrave Elementary School Fair filled out their form and sent it in, and so I had included $300 in the budget. The Blythe Festival had filled out their application forms. They're asking for a little more money than the previous year for both the Blythe Festival tourist booth and the youth outreach program. As we discussed, as we worked our way through this policy, the $4,700 that we pay the Blythe Festival for a management fee is really not a donation. It's an agreement, so we're going to move it out of here. It's not going to change the bottom line of your budget, but however, it should be more appropriately put in another section. The former Blythe Horticultural, that new group is getting up and running, and they did have some money at the end of last year. So at this point, they didn't fill in a form, and I haven't allocated any money for them. Wingham Horticultural has filled in their request. They really didn't ask for an amount, but we have been providing them with $750. The firefighters and the Huron County Farm and Home Safety Programs, neither of those filled in the new forms, and I haven't heard from either of those. Huron County Plowmen did fill in the new form requesting $125. Big Brothers and Big Sisters, the Bowl for the Kids fundraiser, didn't fill in the form, but did send in a formal request letter of $100. We didn't hear from Children's Aid, but both United Way and the North Huron Community Food Bank had delegations, presentations to you over the last while. Building Bridges for the playground, track, fields, etc., had a delegation here requesting $40,000. The Wingham District Hospital requested $500,000. Split into $100,000 each year with a delegation. The Wingham Golf and Curling Club had a formal letter requesting here for $5,000 for replacement of their brine chiller. Clinton Public Hospital had a formal letter in requesting for sponsorship of a gala, and the sponsorship ranged from $200 to $5,000, so they didn't specify in there. The Pioneer Thrashers, this is a little bit different one. They filled in a form to request that their building permit fees be waived for a project they were undertaking. And I'm not sure, Ray, is that going ahead, that building?
I think so, yes. It hasn't been out for tender yet.
Okay. So that's still there. St. John Ambulance did not fill out the form, but they sent in a formal letter requesting support for various programs of $500. Inspiring Women in Huron Again, no formal letter, but they sent in a request for a corporate sponsor at their annual awards. That ranged from 500 to 2,500, but I think 500 was suggested. And you had a presentation from Rural Talks to Rural, the 1419 group, looking for a $5,000 event sponsor for their event in September of 2016. So that brings that to about 160,975. First pass through, I put in 151. So we're short, just over $9,000. But at the same time, I'm not sure what sort of decisions council is prepared to make. In each of these delegations that appeared before you, you had said that it would be deferred till budget time. So here we are at budget time. So again, I'm not particularly asking you to, I hope you have a bit of discussion on this evening, and whether you're prepared to give me direction tonight would be great. If you're not, that's fine as well. But I do think that this would have to be the first item on the docket of your next one in order for these groups, to be fair to these groups so they can proceed.
Just for council's information, I would like you to know that I have been contacted by Bernie Bailey and also Carl Ellis on behalf of the hospital. And they wanted to let you know that they would accept smaller donation over a longer period of time if that's something that council wanted to consider. And I also wanted you to know, for your information, that Morris Turnberry has put $200,000 in their draft budget over a period of 4 years. So $50,000 a year over the next 4 years is what they're considering in their draft budget.
Is there any comment from council?
I would have a question about if Morris Turnberry, if we can get some information, what Morris Turnberry, Wingham Golf and Curling Club have provided Morris Turnberry with a request. Obviously, the fact is that building is in Morris Turnberry, it's not in North Huron. So even though it does say Wingham and District, I'm okay just with the request. I guess if to be fair to them, if Morris Turnberry is not willing to support people in their own facilities, then why are we, other than the fact that ratepayers use that facility from North Huron? But it would be, for me, I would like to look at that as a partnership kind of thing. Is we're willing to support your facilities if you're willing to support your own facilities as well. So I guess if there's a way that we can get some information maybe from their treasurer, or to know what their request is, if there was one, that would be, I think, in my opinion, better suited for that request.
All the rest?
Well, the one comment I will tell is I did get a call from Carrie Ann Cameron with regards to the building bridges. I know there has been from Councillor Bodden a concern about what the school board is willing to exercise in that, and what Carrie Ann Cameron has told me in no certain terms that the school board is going to be fitting the bill for the accessibility portion of that project. So there was no certain terms of what that money was or how much that was, but the school board has, and I know that there is a letter coming into the clerk with regards to that. I'm not sure if that letter stated how much it was or what, but that is coming from the school board, that they are going to cover those accessibility costs with regards to that project. I think that's a pretty substantial project, but that could be spread out over a few years too. I don't think that's going to be a couple of year project down the road as well. But I'm not sure. We need to bite off all of it. There's a lot of things there that I think are just as important from a community standpoint. But the my comment, the ones I would be concerned about are the Blythe, and nothing, this is not against the Blythe Festival or 1419. But what investment, we've committed a fair bit of investment to both of those facilities already. One, the community hall, which yes is our facility, but we've committed a fair bit of money for that for the next 4 years or 3 years at $150,000 a year. And we have an advertising cooperative with them at $12,500 that pays for a lot of advertising for the festival, that like the tourist report and stuff like that. So, you know, I'm wondering if some of these things that we've done every year maybe that's the targeted thing where we pick a targeted audience at a certain time, and maybe they're not annual. Maybe there's biannually or something to that effect. We look at them every year, but we look at what the priorities are in the given year. And, you know, it's no different than every business. Every business gets asked for money. And it's all about, nobody likes to say no, but at some point we have to. And I think some of those, I think we need to look at the dollars, but I don't think we need to look at when. And that's my point. I don't know what other councillors' recommendations are, but we need to strongly look at how much money, like there's ones that are priorities, and I'm not going to say what they are because I think we all know what they are, but we need to look at which ones are annual thing that come every year, and they run their operations based on our money, and we need to look at that.
Rock.
With regard to the Building Bridges project, I see this as a donation not to the community but to the school board. It seems to me that their property is their responsibility. I don't see any reason why it would be justified for the municipality to cover school board expenses. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect is that I would be really deeply embarrassed if I had to go back and tell our ratepayers in Blythe that the organization that took their school from them stole it with a great deal of dishonesty, is now asking us to do the work that the school board should be doing in terms of maintaining its property. So I just don't see any justification. I think this is totally different than the theater in terms of its outreach, because this is not a community thing. This is a school board thing that the municipality is being asked to cover costs.
I'll make a few comments on that, the playground equipment. There was some playground equipment such as soccer nets that could have been moved if they wanted. There was, I know, a number of benches that the elementary school fair picked up at the Wingham Public School to avoid the landfill costs that would have been for taking those to the landfill. And the elementary school fair used the benches for the fair. I have a real problem with things like the basketball nets that could have been taken out of some of the schools that were sold and put someplace on a playground. 40,000 looks like a considerable amount to me. I'm not saying completely write it out, but I think we have to look at the other municipalities that send their children to that school as well, and that if we're supplying playground equipment, I don't believe North Huron should be handling an inordinate amount in comparison to other municipalities on a per capita of the students from the municipality. Trevor?
So all I will say is that that group has went to other municipalities, other municipal councils. So I can ask the group, if they've heard of anything from their budget discussions about what's in their budget, if there is anything in their budget. And then we can at least come back to say, maybe it's one of those things we allot, and maybe if nothing comes to fruition because of the other councils, we don't spend it. I think it's just one of those things where, I hear Councillor Bodden, I hear him loud and clear, about ratepayers, but let's be very clear. The only person you're hurting by not putting that stuff in are the kids. The school board, as much as I respect you, as much as I respect that, the school board isn't gonna drop an eye, in that respect. And that's why they've done it in the past. That's why they're not funding that stuff now. And that's the honest issue, is that right now their school boards are not honest funding that stuff. So parent groups and groups outside of it have to, for the betterment of their kids' education. And that's, as right or wrong that is reality. And the only ones that are gonna get affected are the kids. So as much as that is the pain, and I agree with you, but that's reality.
Right.
With Brock on it, I've had the same situation, and he's one much more to it. And to go back to my ratepayers, they already look at that they're paying for education tax and the tax bill. It should be put back on the shoulders of the Department. If you're going to say no, it maybe, they're not going to do it because they're just not going to do it. Well, they must look at the good of the children too. They've got to take some sort of, I don't mean to throw it back and forth, but certainly something has to be done. So
Brock?
The only
Not in favor.
alternative that I would agree to, and this is very reluctantly, would be the area rate, and I'm sure Donna would enjoy doing that.
yeah, that would be an idea too. Very
Charge
much
it
so.
to wing them.
Sure.
Can I ask a question? When you've installed playground equipment in our own municipal parks, who funded it? Did the municipality fund it completely, or did service clubs fundraise?
Some service clubs helped.
Lions usually would be Lions Club, Kinsman.
Did any municipal dollars go into it that you are aware of, Donna?
I haven't, in my time, I don't remember having.
What about the splash pad or any of those projects?
The splash
Township
pad had a
money
big,
went in the splash pad.
fund, they had a huge fundraising group put on this splash pad.
Just curious.
We donated a few dollars to Auburn.
Yeah, I think Belgrave Kinsman did most of it in Belgrave. Is that right? A lot of it anyway, Neil. I know some of it for sure, so I can answer that.
Between them, and there were certain individuals
Right.
stepped forward,
Step forward to it, so I
So-
don't think there was.
in the thousands, from individuals just to make sure it was done.
I don't think area rating is the way to go. Like I don't think it is. I think we need to understand that there is ratepayers in Blythe and East Wabash that their kids go to Wingham.
Very few,
They still do.
very, very.
They still
And there
do.
are,
So
I agree there are some. But
so the question becomes is we're picking and choosing. Like, and that's not,
yes, it's very bad, and I can see this in this budget, very bad, but I haven't got started yet.
yeah. So like I said, I'm not here to advocate for it at all. I'm just, the fact is that's what the delegation has done, is advocate that they're gone to not only us. And my point is I think we wait to see what has come out of the rest of the councils to really look at whether this comes out or doesn't, and before we give any response to them, because I think that would be unfair to take it out and all the other municipalities give some money and then we don't give any.
It wouldn't hurt me at all.
I think we're definitely going to take another look, and if we can have some information back, what other municipalities that send students to the school are doing. And I will go on to the 100,000. And I know that I'm going to make a personal donation. It isn't done yet, but I know that there's the list of significant personal donations that have been given so far, and that's great. Few of my fellow county councillors, okay, if the county puts in 500,000, and that it's not a done deal yet on that, but they're looking at it over 3 years, or the term of council. I think it's fairly sure that, but they are asking what North Huron is going to put in. At this rate, it would be equal at the 500,000. The one thing I will say, that at our hospital, staffing the emergency room is one of the very important things. And this council pays almost half of the budget for physician recruitment. And that's because people out of North Huron are approaching 40% of the use of the emergency. That's how it's calculated. Where there's an office in Teeswater or an office in Lucknow, those figures are private figures, which don't get calculated in. A lot of people in North Huron, rather than trying to schedule a doctor's appointment, just go to emergency. So on physician recruitment with the formula, we pay a very significant portion more than our neighbors because our people use emergency instead of making doctor's appointments.
Well, I think we've at least had some discussion on it. You knew that it was going to be a couple of big items in your budget this year that you're going to, and you're still going to have to make these decisions. So at the next meeting, whether you call a vote or some of those types of things to be able to move the issue forward and majority rules, then unless you come up with another way of in between the meeting of the minds, we have to make some decisions on it and be able to move forward. So that will definitely be a topic reoccurring. Again, I don't want to keep you too much longer. I just wanted to touch on a couple other things. So one of the last items on the agenda was the house and dam. When you had your delegation in, we talked to them and saying that the house and dam would be part of the budget discussions. At this very moment, we don't have any funds included in the budget for the house and dam, but the balance in the reserve is $212,465. So in 2015, council had authorized taking out up to $15,000, and along with the Heritage Grant, which was applied for, the net effect was the $6,700. So therefore, that $8,400 that was on your transfer back to reserve list, that's how that came to be. So I just wanted to review quickly with council the source of funding. So my information that I gathered was that many years ago, Wingham Council created 2 additional sewer reserve accounts. And at that time, interest rates were significant, and the sewer capital account that we're speaking of had a balance of $771,000 in it. So the council of the day passed a motion that the interest earned off of this account be transferred over to the reserve for the house and dam. And so then that is where this $200,000 has come from all these years of the interest on that. So the main purpose of the sewer capital reserve, however, was to be used for the force main project under the river, which, as you know, we finally completed that in 2010. And that cost approximately $500,000. So the balance at that was, at that time, at the end of the year now then, is $248,703.36. And it earns interest of just over $2,000. So in 2015, that $2,000 was transferred over to the house and dam account, and that account grows by approximately $2,000 since 2010. That's where the money comes from, not like the old days when it was earning a lot more interest. So council told the delegation it would be discussed at a later time. So just wanted to give you a bit of a background and let you know that yes, there's still the $212,000 there, and you're going to have further discussions on it as we move forward.
Well, on that, I think we're looking to the report as to what engineering or what we have to do, whether there's stability report or whether it's an EA or what we do, so that Sharon, if you want to comment on that.
Yeah, so there were a few final details that I was working through with the engineers to determine exactly what the requirements were if it was to move forward with a repair project versus, any other of the options. I have since had it confirmed by M&R that in addition to the stability analysis, we also need a dam break analysis if it's to go forward as a repair project. So that is the $60,000 to $80,000 range. So that's confirmed, that figure. And so I did summarize what the short and long-term costs would be associated with a repair project, both with the initial repair costs of about $458,000 plus the $60,000 to $80,000 for the stability analysis and the dam break analysis, and then repair contracts of about $50,000 every 15 years or so. And looking at those costs over the, say, 35 to 50 year period, that it would extend the useful life of that structure, and also looking at inflation costs as to the eventual removal of the structure at the end of its useful life. So that's where it came well over $3 million, and that was at a conservative 2% per year inflation rate. The engineer actually told me to inflate it at 3%, but I decided to be conservative on it. So those costs could even exceed that over the long term. So you can see your $200,000 reserve is nowhere near adequate to address that structure. Even just looking at the short-term costs of a repair, or you also need to look at what the cost would be if you looked at other alternatives. So I did in one of my reports provide you with some of those costs. Removal at this point would be 1.1 million, and that would be inflated, by 2 to 3% every year going forward. So we do need to put some engineering in the budget as to how we're going to proceed, either with a design to repair and where those short and long-term costs coming from, or you have the option to move forward with an environmental assessment, and that would allow that neutral third party to do the analysis and come up with a recommendation. So the EA process sets out a number of studies that would give you some solid information to make a decision as to what your best alternative is for that structure. It does include an extensive public engagement process through that, where the public has the ability to provide written comment. There are public information centers that provide the results to the public of all of the studies that are carried out through the environmental assessment process. And that all feeds into the recommendation that comes forward to council by the consultant at the end of the process. Environmental assessments have a 10-year shelf life. So that means that you would have 10 years to implement that project once the process is complete and the environmental study report is published. There is also a process involved where the public can appeal to the minister if they don't like the decision. They call that a Part 2 order request, or a bump up request, which, if granted by the minister, would involve additional study of the problem to see if there are any other suitable alternatives, which would add to the cost as well if that were to occur.
Trevor?
So if that group or any individual requests that appeal, is that bared on the taxpayer or is that bared on the group that's putting in the appeal?
No, it's the taxpayer,
That's the taxpayer.
yes.
What was the cost of the EA? Do we know?
I have a ballpark estimate of say $60,000 to $75,000 for that process. And that is contingent upon whether they would require a stability analysis or not. It wouldn't require the dam break analysis, but it may require an analysis of the stability, and that's something we still need to determine with our engineers.
And just to clarify, a dam break would be the dam itself just breaking because it can no longer support itself.
Right, so
It's just
that
a natural.
if you're
thing that
going
happens.
to repair the dam, the M&R has now stated to me in writing that they would require a dam break analysis to make sure that the dam is stable and that there are not going to be any breaks with the increased pressure.
Trevor?
So Sharon, so I just want to make sure I'm hearing the right cost. So the EA is 60 to 75 and plus the dam break analysis and stability analysis at 65 to 80. So you're talking total?
Well, if you want to move forward with a repair project, your next step is to get the stability analysis and the dam break analysis. That is going to be a requirement of your approvals from the ministry. And then you would move forward with design and move forward to implement that project. So that's separate. If you want to consider other alternatives for the project other than repair, then for the remaining alternatives for that project, you are going to be required to do an environmental assessment. It's not required if you're moving forward with a dam repair. If you want to consider those other options, like removal, replacement, or even just monitoring of the structure and seeing how it performs, you would require an environmental assessment for those. So it is a neater process for council because you have that third party who is facilitating the process, giving information to the public, and it does allow for an extensive process with public input into it. And we know there is significant community interest in a project of this nature. I've seen a couple of environmental assessment processes for dam projects. And they look at all of the alternatives. So typically they start with the do nothing alternative. Any environmental assessment looks at that first. What happens if we don't do anything? They'll look at rehabilitation. They'll look at replacement. They'll look at decommissioning as options. They look at different environmental factors. So the natural environment, how does each of those options affect the natural environment? How do they affect the social and economic environment of the community? And so, species at risk, any of those factors, are there any safety factors that would be addressed by any of these alternatives? And spells that out in a nice, neat report for council to consider. And as they look at which alternative comes to the top of the pile, there may be still some negatives associated with that. And so they look at what are the mitigating measures that we can do to offset any of the negative impacts that are created by the preferred selection.
Yolanda?
Does the EA also give examples of dams that have gone through the process and which option that they've picked or not?
No, that wouldn't be part of the process. We could look on the environmental registry and we could see other environmental assessment reports for various structures.
Trevor?
I think I've made this point before. I think we've only heard one alternative so far. and that's repair. That's all we've ever been talked about. It's everything that's ever, it's never been anything else about a repair, from what I've ever heard of any information like. That doesn't give me a nice warm fuzzy, but what all of the alternatives are. And I'm, as much as somebody might say, you could spend $80,000 on an EA and get all the alternatives, or you could have spent that $80,000 on the repair. I don't know if $80,000 on a repair is the right answer. To me, I want to see what in my opinion as a counselor, I want to see a third party tell me what all the alternatives are, what's the impact socially, economically, all that stuff. The only concern I have with that EA process is the 10-year shelf life. Is because if we can't survive now the infrastructure we have, if we go through that process and it's a 10-year life, we have to be pretty clear that we're gonna somehow do it.
So the only thing with that is you can do an addendum at the end of that process, which means you essentially open up the process again. You have another public information center. You review the findings of the initial EA and determine if they're still appropriate, and then you get an extension. So there is the ability to extend beyond the end of an environmental assessment process. Originally, they only had a 5-year shelf life. And so one of the previous ones that I worked on in South Bruce, that did expire, and we had to go through the addendum process. And so it is possible to extend it, you just have to open up the process again.
What's the cost of that?
I can't remember what it was. It would probably be less than the original environmental assessment because you don't have to redo all of the studies.
The one thing that I'll say, if you went the environmental assessment and it came up to repair, you would still have to do the other 2 studies to do the repair. So you'd spend the money for the environmental assessment, and then you'd spend the money for the other studies, if the recommendation was to repair.
And the reverse of that could be true. So if you go to the stability analysis and the stability analysis says the structure isn't stable, then you have to look at your other alternatives and you're back to environmental assessment. So it is sort of a balancing act of, there's unknowns. We don't know.
Maybe we should rate that one. I think. I'm pretty sure from my tax.
They got an order.
I would like, because we don't know the dollars, I think, I don't know whether the motion is apparent, but I think we need a motion. Like, I'll make the motion to make sure that an EA is established in the budget based on the costs found out by the CAO. We know it's not going to affect the tax rate because it's going to come all out of reserves. But that, I think we need to put that in the budget. One, to satisfy the House and Dam Committee that says that our process of whatever the case may be is going. They may not like that it's not the repair project, but it's the process that we've established, and I've commented to them at their delegation that this process probably was my recommendation. And I think to me, that's the cleaner idea, in my opinion. We get everybody's on the table, and it's not so much of a one thought.
A second motion.
Right?
Trevor, the money's coming out of the budget. Now, how much money is coming out of the reserves?
So
It's out of reserves.
The number would be up to 80,000 is what Sharon's proposing, but she doesn't know the actual number. So we could say up to 80,000 at this point.
That would be what I would budget at this point.
So we would come out of the reserve of the House and Dam Committee, of the House and Dam reserve account.
That's 200.
Correct.
That's their money.
No.
Well, it's our money.
It's our money. I know, I realized, but it was put there for the House and Dam is what they're saying.
And that's where it's going. That's what it's being used for.
Any further discussion, or Brock?
I really don't think there's an option. I think that's the only option. Whatever we do, it has to start with that. There are maybe some other options to start with, but they're just as costly. And this one gives us a whole picture of all of the options.
I would just like to comment that I do want to communicate with them. I've told them that I will communicate with them as much as possible. You know, I didn't really anticipate a motion tonight, but I am glad to have some direction from council on what you're thinking. So I do just want to note that I will communicate with them as quickly as possible, that I've been given this direction.
Certainly, I wish to all the council members dedicated for this discussion, but I mean, I think it's only right. So you've got some sort of direction to go with anyway. But,
Yeah.
I think the part for me is that even if they wanted to repair, we'd be spending the 80 grand anyways this year. Like even if their repair project, the way they stated in their fact, we'd be spending the 80 grand on stability and the dam break analysis anyways. So we're not deciding to go that way. We're just deciding to get all the alternatives on the plate, on the table.
And then you would have to decide where, you know, over the next few budget years, where the money is coming from.
Yep.
Because as you can see, where we're at with our capital budget right now, we're needing to trim, and there are some essential projects in there. So we need some, whatever the alternative is, we need to start planning for how we're going to put the money away to address the structure.
Okay, Donna?
Okay, or is that all?
Well, that there's the motion.
Yep.
I haven't done it all in favor. Did you have more information? All in favor? Carried.
Okay, thank you. So that's one item off the list. So I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but on the flavor of capital spending, it certainly is crucial that we get some capital infrastructure projects completed. And our 2 to 3 year plan was to do West Patrick Street, Edward Street, Arthur Street, and Westmoreland Street. That was our outgoing plan for the next couple of years, our work plan. But now that we know that we didn't get the funding for either Patrick Street or Edward Street, the next version of our budget, we're going to have to take a look and see what we can do about it. And I'll have to talk to Kelly and see if there's any way that we can still tackle this project. And again, with Dawn leaving this year, a lot of the water and sewer projects that we had planned to get done didn't get done. So we've really got to put the emphasis on getting our water and sewer capital projects done. Another thing that's really important is that we have to monitor our capital spending to meet our gas tax spending requirements. The annual amount required to have to be spent in capital by the gas tax people wasn't posted until late last fall. And that was the first time that number was actually, we all, for years and years and years since gas tax came out, all did our own calculations and monitored it that way. But we were never sure as to what categories were in and out and all those types of things. So anyway, this, what the gas tax first came out in 2005, and it referred to capital amounts being spent in the year 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003, and 2004. Well, as you know, we weren't even amalgamated in 2000. So as I feared, the construction of the West Cast complex in 2000, 2001, and the Blythe Arena in 2002 would really distort our required spending amount. So when this amount came out, it was saying that we had to spend almost $3 million in capital every year, which, I mean, it's impossible for us to do that. So I've appealed that, and I have sent reams and reams of information into the gas tax people to review our situation and request an amendment. But having said that, we probably would only get down to about 1.3 million, and a couple of years we're not quite there. Now you do get to average it out over a 5-year period. So if you're low one year, you need to beef it up the next year. And we were low in 2015 because of the projects that didn't get done. So it's really important that we monitor that and keep going. So in version 2, once we find out what projects are in and out, I would like to have this discussion with you again on what our capital spending ends up as and to meet our gas tax requirements. Also for version 2, I feel it's really important that we keep moving ahead and get our budgets passed as soon as possible. So we're looking for direction, and I don't know if you want to make a few comments tonight on what you've seen so far in the budget, and obviously we have a lot of work to do to get it down to an acceptable level. And as Sharon was talking about the shared services announcements for the next version, we'll put in the numbers that they have available for the shared services and any available numbers relating to utilities and whatever new information we can to put in there. But I do think we have to keep moving forward and get our budgets still, keep them moving along and getting them passed. So the department heads in the next version also will be reviewing their year-to-date numbers and evaluating all these transfers to reserve for the next round that we just passed tonight. So we'll be looking we're looking for public input then. So the first 3 nights and tonight, we were just looking for information for you to tell you and explain to you and answer your question, what's in here right now? And so you need some decisions and some direction back to us, whether what comes out of here, what else has to go back in, and some sort of a target as to what level, where you want to end up at the end of the day. So at SMT, we're going to talk about, some of our ideas on how to gather comment from the public, whether, we have some open forums at our next round of meetings at the end or some of those types of things. So we've got some discussions to have. I want to aim for, since everyone there's Roma and different things coming up, so I want to aim for a meeting either the week, later on the week of March 7th, because that'll be council meeting week, or the week after that, the week of March 14th. So we'll keep you posted on, it depends on like what we want to do is get some of these numbers, and then what I always try to do is compile that and then have it out to you for a week before we have the meeting again, so that you've had the opportunity to review it. So for right now, I guess for what you've seen, you've been through the budget once, you've had some discussions, various topics along the way. Does council have any comments or questions or some direction for me as and the other staff as working through till we get to version 2?
I think as counselors, at least in my opinion, when we get that second draft from Donna, to kind of expedite the discussion, I think we need to come to that meeting with kind of what we need to take out, what the number needs to be at the end of the day. And that's going to really depend on what the conversation dictates. To go through the budget again, line by line or discussion, I don't think it's valuable. I think even the information of what's been added and what hasn't been, I think we have the key stuff, and a lot of it's going to be, if anything, there's probably going to get put in and the stuff take out, and it's all going to wash, and the net's going to be the same as what we were at before at the start. So, I think we need to come with the ones that we can influence, donations, those types of stuff, the ones that we got to say no, yes, and at the end of the day, we need a number that's going to be relevant to be fair to the taxpayer. And I think we have to be clear that capital is not the place to be cutting. Capital cannot it should not be priority 1 to cut capital. It's got to be operations somehow. And I think based on that, it's going to be some of that stuff is going to come from the service reviews that we've got coming down the pipe. And those aren't going to be, the savings there aren't going to be noted in this budget, but we have to understand that those are coming and realize that those are the things that are going to have to come to fruition in order for us to succeed in this budget. But that's what I see as part of this, because otherwise we're going to be sitting here with the same discussion about donations again, and I don't think it's fair to anybody to sit here and try to hash out old stuff.
Brock?
I don't know what other people think, but it seems to me that it's a fairly easy thing to pick a number as a goal, and like something like 3%. And you can either achieve that where you can't. At least it's a starting point. Do you think that's a useful kind of approach?
Well, I think we always try to look at inflation, and that is in staff's mind where we always think you're gonna say that that's where you want us to end up. But so anyway, and I mean that's a pretty standard across all. It's a standard target for everyone. Of course, you have your flips when you have your years of some wildly important project and those types of things that take you off your path. But certainly inflation, 2 to 3% is where we normally try to end up, of course.
Yeah, it all depends, but the true inflation for municipal, that there's the cost of living for staff wages. But really, when we're looking at the services we supply, those things such as policing and the provincial grants that we aren't receiving, I've heard the figure that depending on what all you add in, that can be 3.2 to 3.7% of what a true municipal inflation is. And that personally, I'm not looking at anything under 3, because I think we'd be shooting ourselves in the foot with what it costs to get things done and how the landscape is changing. But council can go from there.
Well, and I would like to also just say, reiterate as staff is we really need to, keep moving along. And as Trevor said, we need to hear from you with some very firm guidelines and some firm decisions on what we would like to see to get this moving along.
Sharon?
I know you have yet to make some decisions on some very large donation requests. And, maybe a strategy, whatever your decision may be on those, is to quantify those separately in your increase. We have allotted so much to the hospital or whatever campaigns that you are, and this equates to so much of a tax percentage, because you're going to realize that, those are one-time costs or one-time costs over a period of 5 years, and you may want to express that in a percentage to your ratepayers as a decision on your behalf.
Another point on that too is I think for both the school and the hospital, if they're still considered, is the fact that North Huron provides a lot of services to, especially with policing at the school. The police presence that we supply at the school comes out of only Wingham Ward taxpayers. So I don't think that ever gets factored into a lot of these types of donations, as does you just had the big discussion about supplying and providing the helipad service out at the airport, and only North Huron taxpayers pay those things. So I do think that if you choose to support these organizations, that you say that your donation is X in kind of these services and X dollars or something like that. I think it's really important for the other users of those facilities to realize that the North Huron taxpayers put out a lot of money also in support of those facilities. Okay, is there anything further then for this evening? If not, thank you folks, and we will get back to see you in March, and hopefully we can wrap this up in March.
Okay, confirmatory bylaw, first and second reading. St. Bawden, all in favor? Third, finally passed for confirmatory. It's with Minga and Hallahan, all in favor? Carried.
Move to adjourn.
Bawden and St.
We'll let Ray do that one.
All in favor? Carried. We're done. I will just make a